Hello, everyone. Welcome. Shalom. Good afternoon. How is everybody doing out there? I'd like to see how many are connected right now. Okay. Hello, Rocky Pollock. Welcome. I can see your chat there, your message. It's great. If there is anybody else out there, please let me know. Use the chat. Don't be shy. We're going to be studying this week's Parasha, which is Parashat Bo. We're going to continue the reading of some of the plagues that happened right before the Exodus from Egypt. Very, very good Parasha. Lots of great messages. It was kind of difficult for me to pick just a few for you. But yeah, I did the homework and I found some very inspirational and sometimes transformational messages, teachings from this week's Parsha. By the way, full disclosure, this class is going to be a little shorter because we have a funeral at 1 p.m. and I have to stop the stream so they can prepare everything for the funeral because we always use the same channel. So yeah, sometimes we have to share the space. I feel like it's almost like working with one office space and then you have to book it so everybody can have their turn. But yeah, once in a while it happens. I think this is the first time that we had an overlap with Torah L'Chaim. So apologies in advance, but it won't be much shorter. Don't worry about that. Okay, I see we have a couple more people connecting. Very nice. I always remind everybody, right, to subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe and hit the bell so you will be notified every time we go live or every time we upload something to our channels. So let's begin with this class. Let's get into it to study a little bit of Torah. And so let's see what happened here. We're going to talk a little bit about the one specific plague that the way it went. Every plague was more intense and you could say worse than the one before. So this one here is these verses are talking about the plague of darkness. And that was the last one before the death of the firstborn. That was something like that was at a different level. But before that, this was the worst one. But the language in which this is written is an invitation to read between lines and to take a message that it will transcend the generation where this episode took place. Because that's the challenge when we study Torah. It's very easy to get trapped into trying to explore a word or what really happened or how could that happen. So we try to explain using science. How is it possible that it's going to be dark for 3 days? Maybe it was a volcanic eruption. Okay. I mean, if that's the way you like to read the Torah, it's fine with me. But I like to always find something that it will relate to us in this generation. Trying to understand if it was in a volcanic eruption 2,500 years ago to explain the plague of darkness doesn't help us much today. So the idea is to dig and to try to find into these verses something that we can relate to. And let me show you what I found in this verse. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand towards heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt. So Moses stretched out his hands toward heaven, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did any rise from his place for 3 days. But all the people of Israel had light where they dwelt." You see, if you try to explain this scientifically, there is not much to do. How can you explain, there was darkness here, but not there, even though geographically was the same place. So there's an invitation to say, okay, there is something more here. So let's dig into it. And usually the best or a good place to start is the Midrash. So we're going to move into Midrash Rabbah and to see what Midrash Rabbah is going to say about this. Midrash Rabbah says, during the first 3 days, they did not see one another. During the last 3 days, he who sat could not stand up, he who stood could not sit down, and he who was lying down could not rise himself upright. Okay, so here Midrash Rabbah is trying to explain the grammar or some kind of teaching that comes from the way the verse is written. It's basically splitting these days of darkness into 2 stages. The first one was a little bit better, if you want, than the second one. So, and it's almost like implying that the second half was a consequence of something that they didn't do during the first half. Maybe had they changed in some way, second half won't be so bad. But something happened, and now the second half of the play was worse than the first one. So again, another invitation to dig a little deeper here. And for that, we are going to invite a Hasidic Rabbi to share a teaching with us. This is Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Alter, the first Rabbi of the Ger Hasidic dynasty. And he said, there is no greater darkness than one in which people did not see one another, in which a person becomes oblivious to the needs of his fellow human being. When that happens, a person becomes blocked in his personal development as well, nor did any rise from his place. Wow. So what he's saying here, and this is an amazing teaching, is, let's go back here to the biblical text. What it says that during the first 3 days of the plague, they did not see one another. The Rabbi is understanding that they didn't help each other. And this is something that we can all relate to. Whenever we go through a communal challenge, we have different ways to approach it, different ways to react. One is to focus on ourselves. Wait, hey, I have enough in my plate. Sorry, I cannot help you. But the problem is whenever that happened, we don't realize that we are making the situation even worse. To the point that things start to deteriorating, and now you can't even move from your place. It's difficult to overcome whatever came your way. So what we are seeing here is that's why the Torah presents a progression between the first 3 days and the second 3 days. The first time, they suffer darkness. They couldn't see, but perhaps they could help each other to navigate darkness. But nobody did that. Their reaction was, I'm going to be for myself. So that's what it says here. They did not see one another. Literally, they did not see one another. They didn't check on their neighbor. They didn't ask, do you need anything? Are you okay over there? Nothing. And then, at the end, the consequence of that is they couldn't rise from their place anymore. But this is the contrast, because I mentioned before that there are different ways to approach it. At the same time, it says, all the people of Israel had light where they dwelt. Was it physical light, or was the fact that because they help each other, the darkness didn't felt? You know, sometimes it happens that when we have a challenge, but we find a way to help each other, then it's almost like we don't feel the effects of whatever comes our way because we find a way to navigate it together. So it's a beautiful message here that the rabbis are inviting us to see in the plague of darkness. And we are going to see into the next plague, in the plague of Makat HaBechorot, the death of the firstborn, that we totally see the fact that the Israelites were there for each other. Not only that, God commanded them to be there for each other, to make it very clear that that's the Jewish way. So be patient. We're going to be there and reading that passage together because it's fascinating. Fascinating how this is a sequence of events and how we can learn from this. This part of the Parasha, it's all about overcoming selfishness and being there for other people whenever we have a challenge. Because again, as I mentioned, sometimes if we are not careful with our feelings, or if we are not careful with our mindset, we can develop selfish attitudes whenever we have a challenge. Now, the Mishnah actually talks about different personalities and different ways to face life. This is from Pirkei Avot. Again, this is one of the books from the Mishnah. And it says, Arba midot ba'adam. There are 4 character types among people. Okay? And it says, number 1, one who says, what's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours. It's of average character. This is amazing. And some say this is the character of Sodom. Remember Sodom? Probably if you have to find an example of the Bible of a place or a nation that it was pure evil, I will say there are two good examples: Sodom and Amalek. Like evil, 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 right? You can't find anything worse than that. Sodom, a city that was destroyed by God. Nothing. It was almost like what happened at the time of the flood, that God had to intervene and to destroy the people of that place. Because we don't even have that with Amalek, that God's sending some miraculous intervention to destroy them. But with Sodom, God said it's so evil that I have to intervene. And yet here, the Mishnah is saying that people that say, mine is mine and yours is yours, some say that's the average character, but it could become the character of Sodom. We are going to dig deeper into that. Let's see who is here. I can see that the chat is moving now. Dr. Debbie Pollack, hello. Amy Karlinski, welcome. Thank you. And Jerome Fomin, welcome. Let's keep studying. So that was character number 1. Mine is mine, yours is yours. Very common. Let's be honest. We all know people that function this way. Then number 2, one who says, what is mine is yours. What is yours is mine. Said this is the unlearned. If you try to go through life with that mentality, you're going to get into trouble pretty quickly. Because it doesn't matter what is mine is yours. If you are trying to take something from somebody else, that other person won't be so happy about it. Especially if we are talking about that most people will say mine is mine and yours is yours. So if you still think that you can take something from other people, even if you have a good heart, yeah, you're not evil. You're just not so smart. the Mishnah is saying, don't do it because you're going to get into trouble. Then he says, one who says what's mine is yours and what is yours is pious. Mine is yours. I don't want anything from you. Yours is yours. And then number 4, one who says what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine. That's wicked. But it's interesting. He doesn't say that that's Sodom. That would be more logic to say, yeah, that's Sodom. But no, Sodom is number 1. And we are going to see why. But these are the 4 characters according to the Mishnah. And most rabbis would agree that these 4 categories will correspond to 4 different, if not characters of the Torah, 4 different periods of the Torah. In a nutshell, number one, we already read it, is Sodom. Number two, what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine, and learn it. That is the time of the Tower of Babel. Remember what it says, one language and everything. So the rabbis understand that it's a reference to that time. One who says what's mine is yours and yours is yours represents the patriarchs and matriarchs. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, with their tents always open for everybody without expecting any retribution. In other words, this should be the characteristics of Israel, of every Jew, to open our homes and our wallet as much as possible to help others without expecting any retribution. That is ideal. That is ideal. And that it says, one who says what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine, that represents the world before the flood. That is that is basically each one of the 4 points represented by a historical event. But I would say out of the 4, the most difficult to understand is the number 1. And it's deeply related to the plague of darkness that we were reading, where everybody sat on their place. He said, hey, I understand you have your problem, but I have mine. What's mine is mine, with yours is yours. And we see that the rabbis don't really like that kind of lifestyle. So let's read a little bit about Sodom from the Talmud. Okay, this is from the Babylonian Talmud, Masechet Sanhedrin, page 109a. It said, the men of Sodom waxed haughty only on account of the good which the Holy One, blessed be He, had lavished upon them. They said, since there cometh forth bread out of our earth, and it hath the dust of gold, why should we suffer wayfarers who come to us only to deplete our wealth? Come, let us abolish the practice of traveling in our land. Doesn't sound familiar? It's very common for countries in this day. We work so hard. We have lots. We have wealth. So we close our borders. So we don't want to share this with anybody else. But they took it to the next level here in Sodom. It says, if a poor man happened to come there, every resident gave him a dinar. The coin in those days, that was a dinar, upon which he wrote his name. But no bread was given because the store owners recognized such coins and refused to accept them. When the poor man died, each came and took back his dinar. A certain maiden gave some bread to a poor man, hiding it in a pitcher. On the matter becoming known, they daubed her with honey and placed her on the parapet of the wall, and the bees came and consumed her. Ouch! Thus it is written, and the Lord said, the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah, because it is great, Rabbi. Whereupon Rabbi Judah commented in Rab's name on account of the maiden, Ribah. It's a beautiful midrash. Let's see the chat. It says, Debbie Pollack. Yeah, we are talking with David. Yeah, we are connecting the plague of darkness with the character of being selfish. That's in a nutshell, but there are much more. After the class is over, you can probably rewind and watch from the beginning. Yeah, thank you, Rocky. I appreciate your input. Okay, so this is just so you have an idea of some of the things that the Talmud wrote about the city of Sodom. Not so nice people. But then the Nachmanides will say their intention was to stop people from coming among them. As our rabbis have said, for they thought that because of the excellence of their land, many will come there. And they despised charity. They continued provoking and rebelling against God with their ease and the oppression of the poor. In the opinion of our rabbis, all evil practices were rampant among them. Yet their fate was sealed because of this sin. That means they did not strengthen the hand of the poor and needy, since this sin represented their usual behavior more than any other. Besides, since all peoples act righteously towards their friends and their poor, there was none among all the nations who matched Sodom in cruelty. And so, yeah, you see what is happening here. This is what happened if you take mine is mine and yours is yours to the extreme, to the point that this is the law, this is the way it has to be. If you rebel against mine is mine and yours is yours, then you're going to pay the consequences, because then you're going to ruin everything we built here. So we have this city that is so great, it's ours. And we have all those poor people there, it's them. Mine is mine, yours is yours. My wealth is mine, your poorness is yours. So that is the problem with Sodom. And that's why the Mishnah says that, if you have an entire society that says mine is mine and yours is yours, you have a problem. It is okay sometimes when it is the average. That means that, some people are like that, but you know how it works, right? When it's average, that means that you have people that they are above average and they go out of their way to help others. And thanks to those people, society can survive. So the question is that you, one of those people that they are above average, and aiming towards the attitude of the patriarchs and matriarchs? That's the challenge for every Jew. So that's why the Mishnah is comparing mine is mine and yours is yours with Sodom, and it's the same attitude that the rabbis tried to read from the Egyptians during the plague of darkness. Let's move on. So the commentaries explain that the lifestyle of Sodom was one of total emphasis on materialistic gains and overindulgences. They lived with the message of honey and disdained the message of salt. Why it's so? That is why Lot's wife refused to give salt to the poor, and why the people of Sodom choose to use honey to kill the girl who gave it to the poor. Since giving to the poor is unacceptable in a society that places all its emphasis on material gain, they cover her with honey to demonstrate that here we live with a message of honey. But in the end, Hashem punished Sodom with sulfur and salt. We read that in Deuteronomy. As is to say that what Sodom lacked was the message of salt. So here, Rabbi Micha Golshevsky, what he's saying is taking honey as a representation of overindulgence, and salt, the representations of a simpler life where we can help others. Remember back in the day, salt was very valuable. That's where the word, for example, salary comes from salt. Any other comment here in the chat? Let's see what we have. No comments? And I understand there is a little delay between I said no comments and then you can type there. So, yeah. But that's okay. In that case, we can continue. But once again, remember to subscribe to our channels if you haven't done so. And hit the bell so you will be notified every time we go live or every time we upload something to our channels. Let's continue. Now, let's move on to study a little bit more about this Mishnah that I read before from Pirkei Avot, that it says the unlearned is generous towards other, yet hopes to receive in return. He's basically a good-hearted person who cares about others. The commentator Rabbeinu Yonah observed that the Mishnah calls him an Am Haaretz. You see, here is translated as unlearned, but I don't know if you ever heard that word, Am Haaretz. which in modern Hebrew translates as ignoramus, Am haaretz, which literally means one of the nation of the land. This expression is often translated as ignoramus, but more precisely, it means someone who is a full-fledged member of society, and generally a productive and contributing one. He realizes people must do favors for one another and cannot live as island. And he does his part to make life more livable for all he comes in contact with. Yet, he's not entirely selfless. He hopes to receive as well as give. His interest is in himself, equally strong as his interest in others, indicates that he does not see giving as a virtue in its own right, but weighs relationships in terms of his own bottom line. He displays an ignorance as to the true value of giving. Nevertheless, he has a true Jewish heart, and through his acts of generosity, he may one day become a person of truly giving spirit. This is very interesting because it means that even if you are not there to the point that you can give without expecting anything as retribution, that's okay. It's a good beginning. But what I can see out of experience is that people that live a life that I give but I expect to receive are going to be disappointed so often that they end up living a very bitter life. Always, trying to deal with disappointment and how it's possible with all what I've done for him or for her, and now that's the way they repay me. You see, you're always going to be disappointed. People do stuff like that. They won't be fair to you just because you want them to be fair to you. Is it much easier just to train ourselves to give without expectations? And then we are all going to be so much happier. Because I realize that sometimes the reason why we get angry, we get bitter, we live our lives with a chip on our shoulder is because of expectations. If we don't meet our expectations, then we suffer. And then that suffering translates into all those negative behaviors that we all know. Yeah. So it's good eventually to become like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, the ones who were able to give without expecting any retribution. Any comment? Oh, Rocky Pollack just said it better than Rabbi Rosenfeld. Okay, thank you. Okay. So, what I was pointed out before is that this was a progression, right? That we go from the plague of darkness and then move into the plague of the death of the firstborn. Remember what happened that night? I will give you a minute here, so you can type it in the chat. I'm going to test you guys. So we are now during the Makat Bechorot, the death of the firstborn. That was something that affected the Egyptian. And remember that the Israelites have to paint the door frames with blood. That already happens. Now it's nighttime. The angel of death came to kill the firstborn. But what happened inside the houses of the Israelites? Let's see. Who knows? You don't remember? Remember Manishna? Yeah, they were having the lamb and celebrating the very first Passover. They were eating the lamb. Thank you, Jerome and Debbie Pollock. Yep, they were eating the lamb. So, because this was the commandment from God. Tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month they shall take every man a lamb according to the father's houses, a lamb for a household. Right? And bitter herbs. Yes. Yep. So, but what we have to remember is that it says, and in the household is too small for a lamb, right? Then a man and his neighbor next to his house shall take according to the number of persons. According to what each can eat, you shall make your count for the lamb. Right? And the matzah, yes. But you see what's going on here? What God is saying is you have to take the lamb, and the whole idea of taking the lamb is to once and for all to end with this idea that the lamb might be a god, because it was a god for the Egyptians. So it's not for us. It's a lamb. We're going to slaughter it and we're going to eat it. Nothing special about the lamb, okay, for the Jewish people. Hopefully they already learned it after all these plagues. You see, it says the designation of an animal as the Paschal lamb occurred 4 days prior to the slaughter on the 14th of Nisan. The Jewish nation was immersed in Egyptian idolatry, a practice that deified the lamb. Since the Torah counterbalances idolatry to the aggregate of the mitzvot, divine commandments, God's underlying message was, remove yourself from idolatry and attach yourself to mitzvot. Very interesting. So that's the explanation of why the lamb. But what about the second half of the verse, of the text, when it says that you have to share that lamb with other people? And this is when it's getting interesting. What it says, why didn't the Torah write, if you don't have a lamb, if you don't have a Paschal lamb, find a family who has an extra portion and join with them? Why did the Torah place the onus on the one who has the extra portion and not on the one who needs it? The Torah teaches us a most valuable Jewish lesson. Hashem chose to put the obligation on the giver rather than the receiver. Hashem commanded the people to open their homes to the lonely, to the poor and the needy. The people of means should not partake on their Pesach Seder until they have seen to it that their underprivileged neighbors are included. One of the most important aspects of the Pesach meal is for families to share in the educational experience of the Exodus. Parents are encouraged to involve their children. Children are encouraged to ask questions. Even the most scholarly sage is obligated to tell over the story of our redemption. Yet, with all the emphasis the Torah puts on the family unit, it makes certain that no one is alone. Compassion for the poor and lonely is also part of the education that we must teach to our children. Parents are to serve as role model for their children, and so that the next generation will emulate them. So, have you ever wondered why is Pesach the festival where we all get all of a sudden worried to find out if other people don't have a Seder? Because it doesn't happen with any other holiday. It's the Seder. I don't know if it ever happens to you. I remember that even growing up in my very secular home in Argentina, where we were always worried maybe somebody doesn't have a Seder. We should invite that one. Why don't we call that other person? I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a Seder, so they invite him over. It happens every Pesach. What is that coming from? It's coming from here, where the very first Seder mentioned in the Torah had that message embedded in it. Where it was very important for every family to be sure proactively that nobody else will be alone, that everybody will have a place to celebrate Pesach. Can you see that is all the opposite from what happened with the Egyptians on the previous plague, where they only took care of each other. Nobody looked around. Now God is saying, now it is a commandment for you to look around, to be sure that you can help somebody else. And from this text here, from the Torah, the rabbis actually expanded it, and they say that you should not celebrate any Jewish festival if you until you are sure that other people also have where to celebrate it. So they take this commandment for Pesach as a model that should be applied to every other festival. But if you want to be literal, here is saying at least for Passover, we should all do that. And in fact, we do it. But I bet, most people never stop to think why that is happening so strongly in Pesach. It is because it's coming from the Torah. So, Rocky, okay, so the onus is on the givers. Those in need must not expect anything, because that will make them unlearned if they expect an invitation. Yeah, actually, at the end of the day, it's true. At the end of the day, it's true. We should not expect anything. We should not, in general. And, because if you live life full of expectations or everything, and especially things that you believe that people should do for you, because ain't going to happen. We are going to be disappointed pretty often. Okay, so I have one more text for you. It says, our nation is founded upon the principle of children. The children are the ones who guarantee our national continuity. Whether they are biological, adopted, or taught, they are the reason for creation. Every species might be focused on survival. Each individual might attempt to survive, not for selfish reasons, but for selfless reasons. It is selfishness in the service of selflessness. Interesting. We are told to emulate God in all his ways. God is singular in the most unique way possible, yet God exists to do good and chesed. God exists to benefit humanity. Just as God is one and is selfless, so too must we be selfless, although we were each created apart and alone. This is the purpose of education. This is the purpose of family. This is the purpose of marriage. This is the purpose of life. And this comes from the concept, that is, it's a Kabbalistic concept, that God actually creates the world to give. Because you cannot be considered a giver unless you have a receiver. You could be the most wonderful being in this world, but you need a receiver in order to become a giver. So Kabbalah will argue that God needed the world to give freely. And we should all learn from that. And we should teach that message to our children, so they will become also givers. And I think it's a beautiful message, especially in these challenging days where we have sometimes the temptation to become a little bit like the Egyptians, right? And not to move from our place. What is mine is mine, what is yours. But here we learn something totally different, which is that as good Jews, we should think what is mine is yours and what is yours. I don't want anything. I don't need anything from you. Just let me do it for you. And the way we call that in Hebrew, it's actually chesed shel emet. That's why the funeral home is called chesed shel emes. Because at the end of the day, when you do something for someone who passed away, that's the only case, basically, that the dead person cannot repay you in any way. So that's the perfect example of chesed shel emes. But doesn't really mean that you cannot do chesed shel emet to other people that they are alive. It's just that maybe at a certain level within our hearts we still have expectations, but it doesn't mean that we can do it better and better every day. So any comments? And as I mentioned before, I have to stop the class right now 15 minutes before 1, so we can get ready for the 1 o'clock funeral that we are going to have, and we have to share this channel so the funeral can happen. Debbie Pollack just said, Olam chesed ibaneh. Yeah, the world, it was created and actually gets sustained by acts of chesed, acts of kindness. Yeah. Yes. So thank you again, everyone, for being there. It was great to share another virtual classroom with you. Again, remember to subscribe if you haven't done so. hit the bell so you will be notified every time we upload something or we go live. We like to be in contact with you. We like to hear from you. I love when you guys participate in the chat so we can interact and we can all enrich our lives and study together. Thank you so much for being there. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe and hope to see you soon. Bye now.